Okay, so this is the 2019 Le Colline Zinfandel. This is from our home farm at the estate at Cliff Family Farm. Le Colline stands for the hills in Italian, very descriptive of the site. And 2019 was a really lovely vintage. So we get really nice balance between tannin and fruit and alcohol. And this particular vintage for me has really great length. I think this wine kind of sticks with you for a long time after you swallow your sip of wine.
What I love about this wine is it has a deep concentration of flavor, but it's not overly extracted. It's not fat, flabby, or just overly overt. It's got a great depth of flavor. To your point, it's very well balanced, and I think that's a signature of all your wines that you make as well. And it definitely begs for food, but at the same time, it's also quite caressing and delicate, but also quite sumptuous too. So, of a recent vintage wine, it's quite delicious now, but I'm sure this has got a long life ahead of it too.
It does. I think this wine is going to age beautifully.
Another thing I would use to describe this wine is I've had probably, 5, 6, 7 sips by now. It's very generous. It's very giving, and I think it's typically you have a taste or two, and you're now kind of on to either the next wine or the first bite. And I can't take my nose and I can't stop drinking this wine. It's again very generous. Would you like to pair it with some food?
Yeah, let's do it.
So with this, I just want to top this route. I have some Hen of the Woods mushrooms that have been roasted in the wood fire just behind us. Some soft-boiled hen eggs, and then also just some Spanish ham. So this is kind of what you would equate to a Spanish working tapa. So Laura, please help yourself. There's some lush acidity that's really well balanced. I think should actually play very well with these very rich and kind of savory flavors. And I'm excited to try this with the foods. So it's easy for me to talk about food in the presence of wine. I think it really kind of comes with the territory of not only working as a chef, but also living in wine country. When you taste this wine, Laura, what's your immediate thought in terms of your meal? Is this a lunch wine? Is this a dinner wine? Is this a brunch wine? How would you classify this?
I was just thinking that this is a year-round wine for me. This is not a seasonal offering. This is something that you can drink slightly chilled on a hot summer afternoon, or it can be easily served on the Thanksgiving dinner table as your main course red. So I think this has a place in every part of the meal. It's really very pure, and I think when we have a wine that has great purity, it becomes very versatile on the dinner table. So I'm really excited to taste what this is going to be. But that's part of our job.
Mm-hmm. And rarely do we get to do this as much as we'd like to.
My favorite part of what we have here is that charred flavor on the mushrooms. So you have that kind of creaminess on the mushrooms with a little bit of fire to it, and it has this real earthiness, but it's almost like what might be an oak component on the wine. So that comes together beautifully.
I agree. I'm totally on board with that. Mm-hmm. The mushroom component, obviously the blend of smoke and fire, the kiss of fire from the oven, as it really kind of lends itself to the wine. It almost elevates it and enhances it. So that's quite delicious. And might I add, Laura, it's a delicious wine yet again, so thank you.
Thank you. Now can we eat?
Yes. What did you pour, Laura?
This is the 2018 Cold Springs Cab. So we are sitting here at the Cold Springs Vineyard on the Howell Mountain Estate at Cliff Family. And I am thrilled with this particular vintage of Cold Springs. I would say I'm often fearful of a cold year up here because we're a cold site as it is. There's this underlying fear of not being able to get ripe, but this wine is so beautiful and so perfect. It's so well balanced. It's a classic Cabernet. It's very Bordeaux in style, and it has the most refreshing acidity that I have ever tasted off this property. So I think when I think of the cold vintage with this wine, I really only see it in the underlying acid. I don't really see it in the flavor profile. I'm not getting underripe Cabernet whatsoever. It's just the most perfectly balanced wine, and this wine is going to age for decades.
What I love about this is there's so many layers of complexity built into this wine. There is at the core of it a kind of medicinal or herbaceous-like quality that kind of lends itself to a savory note that it really kind of makes it intriguing and compelling to just taste and taste and taste. And again, it's just layers of flavor the blue tone fruits, the savory quality, the herbaceous quality, and then again that very caressing and balancing acidity that just keeps compelling me back to the glass. So this is a delicious one. Should we pair this with some food, Laura?
Let's try it.
All right, so we have a little grass-fed New York strip. We've actually rendered the New York strip in a cast iron pan just behind us with the fire, the wood-burning stove. And then we also have some simmered potatoes that we've pressed and then cooked in the renderings or the drippings of the New York strip itself. So again, this is simple, steak potatoes, obviously cooked in a wood-burning stove to go with this particular site. And again, the wood harvested for the fire itself actually even comes from Cold Springs, which is kind of interesting too. So we are drinking a wine from its place and using fuel from its origin too. So it doesn't get much more unique than that.
I think the wood fire is a key element in this pairing. The wood fire and the oak come together so beautifully, and that in the Zinfandel pairing, that was an example of a contrast pairing, where the Zinfandels didn't have a lot of new oak, and then that charred component from the mushrooms cooked in the wood fire came together so beautifully. And now this is more of a comparative pairing, where we have, for me, it's on the potatoes, a little bit of char from the fire with the oak component of the Cabernet together, just commingle so beautifully.
I still love red meat in particular, or just a nice cut of steak with either our Croquet or Cold Springs, and they interact totally differently. But again, I think it just complements the wine just to the point it allows it to really kind of still take center stage. So each wine each year just tastes better and better, which is crazy because like where does that end? Cheers to that, Laura.
Cheers. This is